Come meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. Alan Medlock will be back with us next week. His team has finished their tournaments and everything, so we should see him back in the co-pilot seat next week as we finish our run of guests that run through May. But until then, we've got Tyler Gett-ing with us tonight. You know him as Redbird Farmhands on Twitter. He's also writing over at Cardinal Prospects and is a co-host at Redbirds on the Arch, the podcast. Tyler, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to round this out for you before Alan comes back. So
yeah, he's actually jumping back in a little bit earlier. I have guests all the way to the end of June, so he's going to have to share the spotlight a little bit. But always better safe than sorry. And there's so many good guests to have on here, including yourself. So let's talk before we get into the Cardinals and all this kind of stuff. Talk about a little bit about how you got into minor league prospect watching.
So I was born in the St. Louis area, and Cardinals fandom was in my bloodline from day one, right? But then I moved to Peoria, Illinois, or my parents moved to Peoria, Illinois when I was about 3 years old. So grew up watching a lot of Chiefs games. That wasn't really where it started, but I remember watching the Chiefs growing up. They were a Cubs affiliate there for a bit, also a Cardinals affiliate. So I got to see some of the Cubs stars like Javi Baez and Anthony Rizzo come through there before they made it to major leagues. But my fandom really started, or the Redbird Farmhands idea really started back in, it would have been 2021. I got the chance to go to a Springfield Cardinals games down in Hammons Field, and Andre Palante was pitching that night. And that was the moment that I kind of fell in love with Cardinals prospects and Cardinals baseball. I was just kind of, you obviously have Kyle telling his story about sitting in the outfield at Old Busch Stadium. Mine was sitting down the, first base line at Hammons Field, watching these prospects, just kind of wondering what these kids were and, what they would eventually become. So that's how my fandom started. And, it's obviously blossomed and bloomed into Redbird Farmhands and what that's become today.
Yeah, because a lot of people would get excited about maybe trying to track these guys or kind of keep up with them, but you've kind of taken it to the next level. I mean, with all the information you've got out on Twitter, and then again the writing and the podcasting, you just kind of jumped in with both feet on this.
Yeah. My parents have always taught me, if you're going to go at something, go at it 100%. So I figured, if I'm going to do this and try to help people learn about the prospects, inform them about the prospects, I can't just go in there and put one foot in and kind of know my stuff, but not really know my stuff. Like I have to know everything. I got to watch a lot of games, and it's got to be like that, because you can't just, it will show up in the quality of your work for sure.
Yeah. And and then this, and I don't know if you knew how much you knew about the Cardinal prospect community, I guess, as it were. You're right. You mentioned Kyle, there's Kareem, there's so many others, Brian Walton's doing this thing. There's a whole bunch of people that are doing this. If you did know that, it didn't deter you, obviously, but was there a little bit of, am I going to be able to keep up with these guys?
There was a little bit of that, but at the same time, you have to find your niche. And when I was kind of looking at what Kyle did, obviously Kyle does all the daily videos. Kareem's very much the advanced stats guy and kind of doing the advanced stuff. And then, right as I was getting in, Blake, who is another, good prospect person and was leaving the community. So I kind of found there was a hole of like, let's do some daily stuff in terms of like the daily recaps and stuff that are pretty straightforward and anybody can look at. But it's not necessarily the video stuff that Kyle's doing. And then, that blossomed into the power rankings and the schedules and everything else that had to, come with that.
Well, it's incredible, and if you're not following, Tyler, you should be because there's a lot of good information out there, and again, in this era of Cardinal baseball, it is so important to know about the guys on the farm, and we are so blessed as a Cardinal community to have all of these guys bringing us all this information, and it's been a lot of fun. But before we turn completely, because I really do wanna talk a lot about the minors, but let's talk about the major league team because it's been a lot of fun as well. This is a team that's we're recording this before the second game in San Diego, and the Cardinals, won last night. They're if I have it in front of me, I think it's 22-15, if I'm remembering
Yeah,
it.
yep, 7 games above 500, I believe.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the Cardinals have not been under 500 all year long. It's one of those little things I keep tracking, and, it's remarkable, right? Because I mean, going into the season, nobody expected that. I think there were some people that were optimistic, and they said, "Well, they might win 75. They might kinda rush at 500," but I don't think anybody saw this kinda team coming together. What do you think the major aspects of this team are right now?
Well, I think when you look at why they're overperforming or why they're overperforming versus what they originally thought. I mean, you got to start with, the young hitters and specifically
Mhm.
the guys that, didn't quite perform last year or just coming on the scene. And that's basically JJ Weatherholt and Jordan Walker. I mean, I don't think any of us expected Jordan Walker to do this, especially after his spring. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we all knew he had an abysmal spring. He was working through a bunch of stuff and it just didn't look good at all. But he kind of figured it out there in the last week spring. And then he's carried that into like massive potential and massive success so far early this season. And JJ's been, as advertised, if not more. I think the main thing when you look at JJ that I'm most impressed with is I think we all knew the bat was going to play, but I didn't think any of us expected him to be a Gold Glove caliber second baseman, and
Mhm.
that's the impressive thing when it comes to JJ in my mind. And it really starts with those two guys, and then I think for as much slack or crap as you want to give the pitchers, I think the starting rotation, like Andre Palante has been better than what I think any of us expected. I think Dustin May had some rough starts there, but he's turned it around in a big way. Michael McGreevy's been good. Now, underlying stats may suggest there's going to be some regression there, but you have to give the guy credit for what he's producing on the field at this moment. So I think it's just a bunch of factors coming around, and I think the clubhouse, the vibes are good. Always led a good club. I think Ollie said last night that this was the most fun he's been having of leading any club in his career so far. So, I mean, it just seems like the vibes are good and, the guys are gelling.
I gotta feel like for Ollie, I mean, it is. I mean, he comes in 22, and he's dealing with the Pujols situation, which was, turned out to be a lot of fun, but it's also a thing you have to kind of be careful with, especially early on when Pujols was struggling. And then you've gotten into, 23, 24, 25, where the team was just kind of iffy and off, and, the big guns are not doing what you thought they would do, and there's a lot of pressure, and all the pressure's off for this team this year, and it kinda shows. I think that's probably a lot of it is these guys are just getting a chance to play. It is funny, you're right, we talk about Jordan Walker, and, I remember, he took a day or 2 at the very end of spring training and was in the lab, and then the last game of spring training, he had a really good game, and we're like, "Man, but that's one game." It turned out it wasn't just one game. It is I don't know that anybody would have thought that there would be this kind of turnaround at this. I mean, you hope for some baby steps or some optimism by the whole, maybe he's making some strides, but not, "Hey, all of a sudden this guy's an MVP candidate."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think any of us coming into the year were hoping, if Jordan Walker can get the league average,
Mhm.
that's a successful season, right?
Right.
And now it's like if this guy goes to league average at this point, I think a lot of fans will be disappointed. And it's taken a month and a half for those, you know,
Mhm.
expectations to completely flip on their head, basically. And that's incredibly. I know Josh. I work with DTC sometimes, and
Yeah.
Josh has mentioned like there's not even like a precedent for like this precedent.
Mhm.
There's not like that for what Jordan Walker's doing. Like no one's turned it around this much, in their career, after having such a bad, 2 seasons before this.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because, there were, and I don't wanna say I was writing off Jordan Walker, but I was a little bit concerned that I was about to start writing off Jordan Walker. And so to have this, and I think for to see him slump occasionally this year and then to come out of it has been a big deal too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I know that we're all kind of holding our breath and worried that he's going to come back to that Jordan Walker we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. And I don't know when we stop that. I mean, if I guess the All-Star break, if he's still hitting, like this or something close to this, the All-Star break, do we finally kind of release that tension? I know it's not logical, but it feels like it's a lot of, this might go away at any time.
Yeah, you're naturally going to have that feeling, and I feel like I'm still going to have that feeling until, like you said, the All-Star break. But I think we just have to notice with these ups and downs with Jordan Walker is like when you have a guy who swings it this hard and is going to whiff and strike out, a decent amount. These up and downs are just going to come with it because when you're just swinging and missing, sometimes you're just going to be off a little bit. But I mean, we've seen when he's right, like when these type of hitters are right, like Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, like those are similar-ish profiles. When they're right, I mean, they're pretty much unstoppable. So you have to take the little bit of droughts, and you hope the droughts are short with these, weeks where, I mean, it just looks like MVP candidate like we've already seen this year.
Yeah. And then and Weatherholt, I think, as somebody that is more of a casual follower of the minor leagues, I obviously knew JJ, the high draft pick, knew that he was a very polished player that was probably going to move up very quickly. But the Cardinals have been burned on these top prospects for so much. Nolan Gorman, Jordan Walker until this year, others that haven't necessarily clicked, that to see him just kind of step in and look from day one like he's been playing MLB baseball for 6 or 7 years has been amazing. And is that enough? I mean, because this team is a lot the same, except for a few people that are gone, a lot of the same people. Is that enough that it just set the tone for everybody else?
I think so. And I think when you look at what JJ does, like, I think it's a big testament to his personality, kind of how he goes about his business. Like, he seems like a professional, and I was on the backfields this spring, and it's like the guy's a professional. He goes about it a professional way. You hear the coaches talk about how he, goes through his work very diligently. And I think that's kind of, he's probably pretty quickly become a sort of a leader in that clubhouse just by the way he goes about his business. And, you always heard in the past, like, Goldie's a silent leader. Like, he just goes about his business away, and hopefully that rubs off on the, younger guys. But to see a younger guy come in with that type of, mentality, with that type of poise is really impressive. And I think those two guys specifically have pretty much set the tone. And, they haven't been getting, anything amazing from any guy, below that 4 spot, but, it's been good enough, or, league average enough that it's worked so far in the offensive profile.
Yeah. And I feel like JJ, he's not one. I'm not going to say he's vocal leader in the fact that, he's going to be like, telling people what to do or anything like that. But he's definitely brought an energy as we've seen on the field. He's not, as when we said that about Goldschmidt, it was because he was businesslike. I don't feel that way about, and I'm not saying this in a negative way at all. I don't feel that way about Weatherholt. I think he goes about his business in a more joyful way, I guess. It feels like he's having a lot more fun out there.
Yeah. He's not just coming to the ballpark, there to do a job. And I felt like sometimes it felt like that with Nato and Goldie and, a few of those other veterans, the last few years, like a Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn. Like, they were just there to do their job. There wasn't like a passion, I don't want to say passion because all these guys like playing baseball.
Right.
There wasn't this energy. And I think this youthful energy is kind of what's propelled this team so far in the season.
Yeah. Now, like you said, the starting rotation, it feels a lot like smoke and mirrors right now, which is fine as long as the smoke is thick enough. It's obviously not, smoke is not coming from the fastballs or anything like that. We know that. But, and I think McGreevy is the most representative of that, because even, even what he did last year and then going forward this year, like you said, underlying metrics say this should not be happening, and yet somehow he keeps going out there and throwing like six innings and 2 earned runs and getting everything he needs to turn it over to the bullpen. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it's been quite a while and that shoe hasn't fallen.
Yeah. I think, like I said with JJ, this is just a testament to kind of, you watch McGreevy on the mound and the guy just doesn't seem to get flustered. right? Like he just kind of goes out there and does his business. He might give up 110-mile-an-hour double, but he just gets back on the mound and, executes another pitch. But, I think a lot of McGreevy's success has to be a testament to what Mason Wynn and J.J. Weatherholt and even Nolan Gorman, who's been much better defensively, and even the outfield, Victor Scott and Nathan Church having two center fielders in the outfield, on a regular basis has probably really helped him. So, the Michael McGreevy profile, I expect it to go down. I don't think he's going to be holding an ERA in the 2s or maybe not even the 3s by the end of the season. But if there's a profile that can overperform his metrics in this type of scenario, it's going to be a Michael McGreevy type of profile given his defense behind him.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think there's going to be concerns as the season runs on. These guys get a little bit more tired and, because they're on such every pitch has to be perfect to be, effective. And if that starts to slip a little bit because of fatigue as the season goes along, that is a little bit concerning. But, the Cardinals have done a good job over the last couple of years of really managing workloads. It feels like, that Cardinals didn't have, significant pitching injuries last year. Knock on wood, have not had that much this year in the major leagues. So, I don't know if they've figured anything out or not, or if they've just been kind of lucky, but it does feel like maybe they're juggling things around so that these guys won't wear down as they get to July and August.
And I think the good thing there is, Michael McGreevy and Matthew Liberatore, those are the two guys that have, been through this before, been through the whole gauntlet, either through the major leagues, the minor leagues, and have thrown, 150 plus innings in a season. So those are hopefully going to be your two anchors. And it's like Dustin May, hopefully you can get him to the deadline. And, I think even if they're somewhat contending, he might be a trade piece, but it's like, how much is Dustin May going to give you after Kyle Leahy's coming off of a reliever season? So you won't imagine he won't give you more than 120, 130-ish innings. He's not going to go the whole way. And then it's Andre Palante, who I think he's went the whole way last year, but he kind of struggled in the second half. So is it going to be the same this year where he drops off in the second half as he gets tired, as you mentioned, or is he going to keep that performance up throughout the whole entire year? Who knows?
Yeah. And that, maybe that's our transition spot because, in theory, and I think when we went into this season as fans, we thought, okay, this pitching staff really only has to hold up until June or July or whatever because there's going to be some reinforcements coming. We've seen Hunter Dobbins make an appearance. We'll see him again, I know. But it feels like maybe that depth isn't quite as ready as we were thinking it would be. If they had to go to another person right now, who do you think it would be?
I think you have to look at Bruce Zimmerman, right? Like 30-year-old, he's made major league starts in the past. Even last year, I think he made one with Milwaukee. And that's not because Bruce Zimmerman's this like great pitcher that, has MLB potential to be there in a rotation for a long time. It's just the fact that, a guy like Quinn Matthews hasn't quite figured out the walks yet. It's been better in the past few starts, but it's like you need to see more than him string together 2 or 3 starts. You need to see him string together 7 or 8 starts with, that increased command before you really feel confident in him coming up at the major league level. Bryson Motts has dealt with that same sort of command issue, even though he's limited it better, a little bit better than Quinn has, and he's got an ERA in the 2s, which is pretty impressive considering he's not really striking out that many guys and walking a lot of guys. But yeah, the depth doesn't quite seem as ready as you would hope, but that could definitely change by June, July time period if some of these guys make the progress that, they have the capabilities and the athletic abilities to do.
Yeah, and losing Richard Fitz to the year was a significant blow. I know when they announced the lat strain, I knew it was going to be a while, but I was a little bit surprised, one, that they went, to a surgery so quickly, and 2, that it'd be out for the rest of the year. I don't know do you think that maybe that's a shift, as we talk about this, a shift in philosophy as well? Because it feels like maybe in the past the Cardinals wouldn't have gone with surgery that quickly. Maybe the injury was more severe than and it needed it, but it feels like a lot of times in the past you'd have a lot of rehab and all this before even considering that.
I think it's a good example. Like you said, we don't exactly know the severity, but I think it's a good example of, looking towards the future, right? Like if he just lets it heal up and, waits 4 or 5 months, comes back and pitches at the end of the year, but he's only half healthy, and then it crops up again next year, and then the next year after, like that doesn't serve you any good to have surgery in 2027. So you might as well just get it out of the way right now, and hopefully he comes back fully healthy and ready to go for next year. And this is not a reoccurring issue for him. And I think that's what you hope with the surgery. I think the best example of that is with the old regime is Cooper Jerpy. I mean, they kind of did a cleanup surgery. They kind of did another surgery, to kind of get it all right. And then it didn't help at all, right, in the elbow.
Right.
And he eventually had to have Tommy John anyway. So it's like, I think there is a little bit of a shift in focus there of like, let's just get the stuff out of the way. Let's get our guys fully healthy and not try to mess around with this like half health. Let's let it rest and kind of feel a little bit better, but still pitch you type of deal.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, it's so hard for me to determine what's the difference in philosophy versus what's the different, how much of it is philosophy difference, how much of it is expectation difference, right? Because, when Mo was in charge, there was this idea that you were going to need these guys. You had to do everything you could to, try to get into the playoffs. And this year, it's like, they're not looking for that. And so, you don't have to worry about Richard Fitz coming in at the end of September because you need an arm. It's like, if you don't have them, they'll throw somebody else out there and don't worry about the results. I don't know if that's fair or not, but it feels like it's for me hard to judge how much is philosophy and how much of it is just because the goalposts are different.
Yeah. And it's also, we never, especially on minor league injuries, never really get a good idea of what exactly these guys went through or, what exactly the injury is. So sometimes, it's just situational differences, maybe something's just a little bit different in this guy's injury versus this guy's injury. And, so, it could be situational. There's a lot of different factors here that could go into stuff that we just don't have an idea about, especially on the minor league side.
Yeah. And I know, again, you mentioned Quinn Matthews. That was a guy that a lot of people, of course, it's been a rough couple of years for Quinn Matthews, hasn't it? I mean, from going from where he was like on the brink of making a call up, it felt like, to now, I don't know. It still feels like it's going to happen, but it's not as much of a slam dunk as it used to be.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us, the MLB balls kind of put some of their best pitching prospects for a spin lately. And whether that's good or bad, and how the guys are able to react over time to it, it's going to be, we still got to see that. But I think Quinn Matthews, 2025 was just kind of a lost season from him almost from the beginning. He had the shoulder strain, came back, didn't really have his velocity, didn't have his command anymore. It was just kind of all over the place. And then, this season he's come back and, the good thing with Quinn this year is the velocity's back. His pitches from a metric standpoint and a swing and miss standpoint look, the best they have ever looked almost, at least rivaling that 2024 season. But yeah, the command's just still not there, right? Like the command that he had in 2024 that made him that elite pitching prospect that struck out 200 guys, won minor league pitcher of the year, made him a top 20, 30-ish prospect in all the minor league system. Or not all the minor league system, all of minor league baseball. It hasn't come back, and it's a little concerning. But I think I still hold out hope, and I think a lot of people still in the system hold out hope that like if he can get back to just showing what he's kind of shown the last couple starts and do that more consistently, that he can still be a mid back end rotation starter for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and again, it feels like they're going to give him that time, right? I mean, if the Cardinals were 22-15 in a season where they expected to win, there might be a little bit more push of saying, let's, bump out a McGreevy or, well, probably more like a Palante or a Leahy maybe. And let's bring Matthews up and we'll deal with the walks at the major league level. But without that, impetus, they're able to really let him develop where he needs to be without having that extra pressure on his shoulders.
Yeah. And I think one thing that, you might have seen the Mo regime do in the past is we don't have another competent lefty in the bullpen. Let's throw Matthews in the bullpen this year with the walk issue. Like he might just need to be a bullpen pitcher for now. And then, who knows, they did it with Ryan Helsley where they put him in the bullpen and they never took him out. And, it would have been interesting to see him start some year, but he never got the chance to. So this new regime's, if they think a guy's got starter potential, they're not just going to yank him out of the starter potential just to put him in the bullpen. just to do it, like kind of like the Mo regime did in years past. And like you said, that's just a difference in where they are as a franchise. They're not contending this year. They don't need that extra bullpen, elite bullpen lefty that they would probably need in years past. So it's just a difference in thinking, like you said. And I'm just glad to see them, staying course with him, because I think he does have a lot of potential as a starter if that's necessary.
Of course, the other name I think that stands out on the radar, or at least did and still does, is Liam Doyle, who has had ups and downs in this first full season, right? And what are you seeing out of him right now?
Jim Callis of MLB.com had a really good article about Liam today. I don't know if you got a chance to read that or not, but it basically goes into the fact that, like, the Cardinals want this guy to develop into a starter with 3 or 4 pitches, not just the fastball, not just the splitter. And that's kind of his main 2 pitches. And the fastball has been good this year. The velocity is still there. The movement's still there. He's still getting a lot of swing and miss in the pitch. But to be a viable major league starter, like, this guy's going to have to develop a slider. He might have to develop, the curveball that he has. And it's like, you don't want to just run him to the minor leagues with the fastball and the splitter, and he never has to throw the curveball or the slider, and then he gets up to the major league level and needs those pitches and doesn't have feel for him. So letting him work on that now, even if the the start of the year is the struggles and it's bad, then it's like, who cares, because you need him to have those pitches. And Jim made a good point, which is like, if these struggles came in August or July, then it's like that might be a lot different if you started the year off really hot and then had these struggles. Whereas it's like, he started off the year like this, so now people are getting a little bit more concerned, when I really don't think they should be. I think he's just working through some stuff. He's looked a lot better his last couple starts. He pitches again tomorrow night, which would be Saturday. So he's just going through some stuff right now in terms of his arsenal that's going to be beneficial for the future. You just have to trust the process.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound to me, and you can tell me if I'm right or not, it doesn't sound to me that you have soured at all on his potential at the major league level.
I have not, no. I think people, because of the college route, because of how high he was picked, I think people kind of expected him, or people that didn't do as much research on him kind of expected him to be a more finished product than he was. But I think people that really knew him down deep kind of knew that it might have going to be a longer process, just given the fact that he used that fastball at 64% in college, and you're not going to be able to do that in the major leagues or even the upper minor leagues. So but like, I think they drafted him number 5 for a reason, and it's because there's tons of potential there with the fastball, and if he can develop these other off-speed pitches, and I think he can, just based on how the Cardinals development has been in the past couple of years. I think he'll develop that, and I think he might have as good a potential as anybody in that draft class on the pitching side, besides maybe Seth Hernandez, who's just been crazy good.
And his former Tennessee teammate Tanner Franklin has obviously made his name as well this year, but he has some of the same issues, right? I mean, he's very much been focused on the fastball, and he's done a very good job of overwhelming lesser hitters with it. But I assume that one of the reasons he hasn't gotten moved up just yet is he's still working on some other stuff as well.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing with Tanner Franklin is it's a little bit more complicated than the Doyle situation, right? Because he was a college reliever last year. He only threw 38 innings, I think, and then if you add his MLB innings in there and his Cape colleagues, I think it's somewhere around 50 innings, I believe. So this is a guy who's trying to go from 50 inning relief to a starter. So he's not only trying to pitch more innings, he's trying to pitch more innings at every start, and that gets a little that's different on the body. That's a different routine, and this is a guy who kind of like Kyle Leahy, but at a lower level, is just trying to figure out the starting routine, and he hasn't done it in the past. So it's interesting to kind of watch his development. His obviously has the fastball, which is right up there with Doyle in terms of the best, but he's had to develop a sweeper and a changeup and a couple other pitches. The cutter was one of his other pitches in college, so he's had to develop some pitches that he doesn't quite have feel for yet, and he's kind of struggled in these past couple starts against better lineups. But yeah, he's going through the same thing as Doyle in terms of developing those pitches and, developing the ability to go length during a game and during a season. So, he'll be an interesting watch to see if the body holds up, to see if the velocity holds up as the season goes on and as he gets further away from that career high he had last year.
Yeah, that is such an extra wrinkle to have to work up your innings level as well. But thankfully, they're young enough they can do that and still get to those levels before they're really needed at the major league level. Hopefully, so we've talked about a lot of the big names. Who else on the pitching side is catching your eye?
I think you have to start with Yoiker Fajardo. Down in low A, I think his ERA is like 1.46. He's only 19 years old, which is, just incredible. And he's polished. Like, this is a guy, or not polished, but he's more advanced than your typical 19-year-old pitcher. Like, he's already has 2 good breaking balls in a slider and a changeup, both of which get a ton of swing and miss. He's got like a 33% strikeout rate this year to like a last time I checked, it was like a 3% walk rate. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous numbers at low or at high A. Yeah, he's just incredibly polished. He knows how to pitch. He strikes out guys, doesn't walk guys. I mean, just anything you want from a 19-year-old. Now, the fastball is not the best movement profile, but he has ticked it up in velocities, now sitting more like the 95, 96 range, which is really encouraging. And I wouldn't be surprised if this guy gets a promotion to Double A as a 19-year-old pitcher. And I mean, there's not much you can say about that. And I think when I release my updated, top 30 list here in a month or two, it's going to be like he might be a top 10 prospect in the org just based on how he's performed so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of crazy because obviously he was a big part of one of those Red Sox trades. I can't just remember.
He was the Wilson Contreras
trade. Was the Wilson trade? Okay. I knew he came over Boston, and I just couldn't remember which one. But for him to have that kind of success and movement is pretty remarkable. I mean, obviously, Double A is another challenge, and we'll see how when he gets there how he handles that. But I don't think anybody expected that kind of run, just to start out like this.
Yeah, I don't think anybody did, and I think anybody that said they did would probably be lying to you. I mean, I think we all thought he was a good prospect, but I don't think any of us expected him to be this good against even these lower level hitters because, at the end of the day, this guy's 19. Like, it's not like he's a college arm in low A dominating guys with their fastball, kind of like Tanner Franklin. Like, this is a guy who's 2 to 3 years below his age level, and he's just dominating guys in a way that you don't really see with 19-year-olds at high A very often. This is a guy who very realistically could probably make his major league debut, before his 22nd birthday if everything kind of continues and the command continues as it is.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how far back you would have to go to find a young pitcher like that. I mean, obviously I remember, Rick Ankiel coming up at 20, but there's not been that many because a lot of the Cardinals pitchers of the last, run have been more of a college ones. I guess Jack Flaherty came out of high school, but I don't think he moved up quite as quickly as that, did he?
No, I think, what was Jack when he made his debut, like 22, 23?
Something like that, yeah.
So yeah, like, the Cardinals haven't quite had this young of a pitching prospect come up this quickly in a long time.
Yeah. And again, I know you and all the other prospect guys are always, you put a lot of caution on those things, I mean, there's no guarantees and every level is a new thing, but it's exciting to see a guy that you can kind of dream on a little bit and wonder, because we haven't seen a guy that has that kind of strikeout potential in a while, to have a guy, like Doyle and Franklin and Fajardo that are now coming up, and to think about a rotation that can have that swing and miss as we continue to talk about is really exciting to at least have those options, because in the past we've not even had those guys in the system to be able to dream on.
Yeah, the old regime, had this tendency to kind of draft higher floor, lower ceiling type of guys who, they knew were going to keep the ball in the zone and compete, but maybe didn't necessarily have the strikeout stuff that, other guys in their draft class or in their area kind of had. So it's good to see them, aiming for a certain type of target and hitting on some of these guys so far through their trades and through the draft. So, yeah.
It feels like we talk a lot about these pitchers because they are exciting, and because there's such a need at the major league level for these kind of guys.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's offensive prospects as well. Renault Rodriguez is probably the biggest one, right? I mean, that's a guy that is really making his mark on national lists all up and down baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even you can start so many places with the Hulk, right? Like, and I think the Hulk nickname should tell you everything, you need to know about what Reynel Rodriguez does to baseballs, and that's just crush him. Like, his plate discipline is so good, but at the end of the day, what he does is he hits the ball in the barrel a lot, and it allows him to drive in a ton of runs, hit a ton of home runs, and hit for a lot of power from, like, what is a 5'8" to 5'10", no one exactly knows frame. So it's like how he gets that much power and how he gets that much pull side juice from that frame. I'd love to see a physics class on it, but yeah, I mean, just the power is incredible, and then you combine that with he's almost walking as much as he's striking out this year. And, when you do that at 19 years old at high A, that's pretty impressive. And I wouldn't be surprised, like with Duiker, that if he gets a promotion to Double A, and that's really where the challenge will begin for him as he starts to see more advanced pitchers. If he can continue to kind of keep this raking up and how he keeps hitting, and if he does that, then I mean, I don't think there's any way he's not a top 20-ish prospect in all of baseball.
Yeah, and they'll have to, make some agreements with Marvel. Maybe they can get the Red Hulk, logo and use that for him. Yeah, I think it's just so exciting to have a real power hitter in the organization, and a guy that, because that's the kind of thing we thought they had with Nolan Gorman, and what maybe they have with Jordan Walker now, with obviously that things have clicked. But, having a guy that you could imagine coming up and hitting 30 home runs or so is a fun thing. And again, not something that the Cardinals have had a lot of.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we'll probably get into these guys a little bit later, or we can get into it right now if we want to. But, the Cardinals have started to emerge with some power guys. I mean, Jimmy Crooks is just tearing the cover off the baseball right now. He's hitting the ball, as hard as anyone in all the minor leagues. Like, barrel percentage is at like the 90th to 100th percentile. It's kind of fluctuated between those two. It's at like 21%. He's just hitting the ball hard every time. He's striking out a lot, but kind of similar to Jordan Walker. He's just hitting the cover off the baseball. And then Joshua Baez has a ton of power, and he's shown that over the past couple of, last year and early this year, where it's like when he makes contact, it goes a far way. So the Cardinals starting to emerge as kind of a power development system is something that needs to be noted, and is something that's very impressive.
Joshua Baez obviously had a great spring. I know there's the strikeout concerns. Do you and everything else that goes along with roster construction and everything like that? Do you think he gets a major league debut this year? And if so, is it before the All-Star break, or is it later in the year?
I think it's later in the year. I think, obviously we don't know what 2027 holds with the CBA and all the lockout stuff, but I think the Cardinals will, especially with the Nathan Church emergence, I think they'll be fine with, trying to hold Baez's prospect status until 2027. Maybe he gets a Jimmy Crooks or a Cesar Prieto or a Thomas Ajace or Mason Wynn type of call up at the end of the year, where he doesn't, waste that prospect status. But I don't think the Cardinals will be too urgent to call him up, because I don't necessarily think they're in a nice enough spot where I don't think they necessarily need him yet.
Well, and especially, Lars Nootbaar should be off the injured list by the end of the month, where, we're talking about 2 or 3 weeks here. And even if he plays well enough that he gets himself traded by the deadline, until then, you've got, 2 months of, 4 really good outfielders right now, right? With depending on what Victor Scott if he can continue to start upward trend like he has looked like the last day or two. And so, yeah, it becomes harder to see how you squeeze him onto the roster when you get Lars Nootbaar back.
Yeah, for sure. And we obviously don't know what Lars is going to be like when he comes back. Hopefully he's good enough to either get himself traded now, or not now, but at the deadline,
Right.
or, in the offseason. But I wouldn't, if he doesn't play well, I don't think the Cardinals may not just hold on to him throughout the whole season. I don't think that's totally out of the question, depending on how they're doing, how they feel Lars is important to the clubhouse culture. And it's like, if he is not performing to a point where he can get substantial assets, they might just end up holding on to him till at least the offseason. So I wouldn't totally rule out Lars, being here till the end of the year.
Yeah. And we are getting to that point. Well, we've seen this for a long time with Cardinals, and especially in the catching position, but now in outfield and things where you're starting to run out of, you've got good young players and no place to put them. Are any of these guys a possibility to be moved at the deadline instead of, coming up?
I don't know, because I don't think the Cardinals want to dip into their prospect pool at all to try to get assets, or not at least their, top 20, top 30 type of deal. But I do think, and me and Kyle were talking about this, on Twitter the other day. It's like, if they find a creative deal where, they have a pitcher that has 2 or 3 or 4 years of control left that they like and think can be 1, 2, or 3 in their rotation that they need to trade a Jimmy Crooks or a Leonardo Bernal for, then I think they'll at least explore it, right? But I don't think they're going to just trade any of these guys in this type of area for, a half year rental to try to make the playoffs this year for sure.
Right. Yeah, I don't see that being the kind of thing that this front office would do, and definitely not something they should do. But you wonder if there's not a way to match up so where you can trade a catcher and an outfielder for maybe a pitcher that is ready or just about ready, something of that nature. Those are deals that are hard to do at the deadline, though, right? I mean, because most of the time those kind of trades are somebody looking for something that'll help them right now versus some sort of prospect swap.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even know what a comparable deal would kind of be. My head went to the what was it? The Red Sox trade of Kyle Harrison and I forgot for Caleb Durbin. Like, could they trade? You trade a couple prospects away to get a Kyle Harrison type of deal, like the Brewers did or whatever. So I don't know. I don't have a comparison off the top of my head that would be good for that type of trade, but I could definitely see them being creative. This front office, we kind of know it's really open communication, and I'm sure they'll have a brain trust together, determining what to do with these different assets, throughout the summer.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned it. I think they're a lot more creative maybe than the last group was. Not that they couldn't be, but it just, and again, different reasons, different focuses, and things of that nature. They have different needs to what they get back. But I think we saw a lot of that with this winter. With Heim trading off, especially like Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras, and getting back a pitcher that's ready, but then a pitcher that's a prospect as well.
Yeah. I think these guys, Heim Bloom and Rob Cerfolio and the whole, front office group that they kind of brought in, Joe Douglas, I think these guys are just a bit younger and maybe a bit more passionate, a bit more motivated, and maybe just a bit more creative in kind of the way they think about baseball than maybe a Mo and the older prior regime was. And that's not a knock against the older prior regime. They got us a lot of success, at least through the mid 2010s, but it's like they definitely lost their touch, and I think anybody can agree with that towards the end there.
And I think, it's fair to say that, these are younger people that are maybe a little bit more in tune with what is going on now. That part of the problem with the Cardinals was that they didn't have a lot of people that had been in other organizations. And so they didn't necessarily know how baseball was working outside of the St. Louis bubble, as it were. And I think, Heim obviously has been in a couple of other organizations. He is younger, so he's been in them more recently. And he did a really good job of pulling staff from different places. And I think you start melding all that together, trying to figure out what, your perspective is going to be. But it's going to be more in line with the meta of baseball, if you will, whatever is going on in the game now, they're going to be more in line with it while trying to put their own spin on it.
Yeah, for sure. One of the benefits of having a person like Cerfolio from the Guardians and having Larry Day from the Dodgers and having, I think they brought in another person. I can't exactly remember the name, but I think there's like the strength coordinator. He's from like the Giants, and having all these perspectives from different organizations, you can kind of mesh it and meld it into a new thing that, hopefully, at the end of the day, you hope it brings out the best in each of these organizations and what they did, make the ultimate, development and talent acquiring type of formation. So, yeah, you hope to get the best out of all these organizations, and this outside feedback is something that Cardinals, like you said, have been, missing in the past, and it's something that I think could be a great benefit to teams.
So I think we expected by this point in time of the season that we would be focusing really heavily, and you and Kyle and others would be informing us of what the Cardinals are going to do in the draft. Cardinals have a lot of 6 picks in the top 88, I think it is. A lot of good talent that can come into this organization. Now, obviously, the major league team has been better, and so I don't know that there's been as much of a casual focus on that, but we're starting to get, within 2 months now of the draft. I don't know that there's anybody in particular that you are looking at, but what's the philosophy that you want to see them approach the draft with?
I think I want to see them do a similar philosophy to what they kind of did last year, at least on the pitching side, right? Which was go out and get big arms that have a bunch of strikeout stuff. And even if they were a reliever in the past, we've seen that work out, pretty nicely here early this season. I mean, Ty Van Dyke was like a 10th round guy with a lot of strikeout stuff, but was a reliever. They've turned him into a starter, and he's looked, really successful so far. Some of the other guys they have down at Palm Beach, obviously Tanner Franklin and Liam Doyle are the two big ones, but like Craig Crossland's look pretty solid. So it's like they've had success moving these guys from a relief to starting, even if they have, if they have better stuff, but necessarily didn't get the means to start in college, either because they were at a big program that, didn't have that many rotation spots, or they were at a smaller program and, were trying to figure out their command or something. So, keep going after that swing and miss stuff on the pitching side with good characteristics. And then on the hitting side, I mean, one of the biggest struggles, I talked about this back in October, so it was an article a while ago. You might have to go look it up, but it was right after Fangraphs put out that the Cardinals were like the number one farm system in all of baseball. I don't know if you remember that time.
Yeah.
But I talked about what they struggled with on the offensive side, and that was swing decisions. Like they were swinging out of zone a lot, not really making good swing decisions, and they went out in the draft last year and got guys with really good swing decisions that swing at balls in the zone that make really good contact, and you're seeing that come to fruition with a guy like Jack Gurovich, who's just hitting the crap out of the ball and really having a good season. And Jalen Flores was a guy that had a little bit more swing and miss, but had a really good sophomore year, and they found this guy and got him in the 11th round, and he's been really good for him. So just having more philosophy and really staying in that kind of direction, while being able to use this money they have from the 6 picks and the 5th or 4th largest bonus pool in the whole draft, to really maybe take a shot at get a couple high school players instead of just one like they did last year with Brian Mitchell, or be willing to take that high school pitcher when you wouldn't have been in the past. So I mean, there's just a lot of different directions. The Cardinals, I don't know if you remember, but they promoted Zach Mortimer to their head of drafting now. So Randy Flores is not the main guy over that anymore. So I'll be interested to see if that comes with any shift in philosophy, or if we kind of see what we've seen in the past in these trends.
Out of those 6 picks, if it was you, and again, I know it depends, best player available, all that kind of stuff. It's going to depend on what everybody else does. But if you were just on the overarching thing, would you rather see that split 50-50 pitching? Would you rather see them draft, a little bit more offense or a little bit more pitching?
The early trend in this draft, or what? Not early. I guess we're getting into the mid to late part of this draft cycle. But what I've seen so far is I feel like the hitting right now, in terms of best players available, kind of who I've been looking at. The hitting looks stronger than the pitching, at least on the collegiate side. Now on the pitching side, I think this is one of the stronger high school pitching classes. Now, the Cardinals have been kind of adverse from drafting high school pitchers in the past, especially after the kind of failure, or maybe not failure yet, but it certainly doesn't look good with like Tink Hence. So it's like, they've been kind of a little bit adverse of drafting those high school pitchers, but I think this is one of the stronger high school pitching classes, and with 6 picks in the top 84 or 86, I can't remember off the top of my head, but
somewhere in there.
But I think this is, if you're going to ever take a shot at another high school pick, when you have 6 picks in the top 84 and you're going to get a lot of talent, taking a shot with one of those picks on a high school pitcher might be the way to go. So I hope to see them, if they want to go pitching, tip into that high school pitching pipeline, because I think it's a lot stronger than the college pitching this year for sure.
It'll be interesting to see now. Obviously, I mean, for the most part, we just talked about Fiardo, but for the most part, that's those are ones that we would have to watch a lot longer, which is not great for the instant gratification fan, of course, but could be really effective for the team in general. So to kind of wrap up a little bit tonight, I know you watch or keep track of all the teams, but right now, where do you find yourself? What team do you find yourself, kind of drawn to watching maybe a little bit more than the rest of them?
I think the answer, and I think if you ask Kyle this question, if you ask Cream this question, I think it has to be Peoria, right? Because not only do we have Rainier Rodriguez, not only do you have Yorker Fajardo, but you have Ty Pete, who the Cardinals just acquired and has looked really good this year. He's hitting the ball really hard. He's still striking out a lot, but he leads the Midwest League in RBIs still, I believe, and he's hit more extra base hits than anyone in the system. So he's been really impressive. Jalen Flores, like I said, just a couple minutes ago, has been a nice revelation for the Cardinals out of the 11th round. Jesus Baez is there, and is slimmed down, and it looks like a really good middle infield defender with a bat that can really pop and has a lot of power sometimes. And then on the pitching side, Tanner Franklin's there. Like I said, Yorker Fajardo. Nate Dome's interesting. He's saw some increase in velo and some increase in effectiveness this spring, and that's kind of taken over and kind of led over into the season. Leonel Sequeira is another one of those guys that is 20 years old, is already here, has seen, consistent increases in velocities, now sitting 96, 97, found a new changeup, and it's interesting there. So the pitching's there interesting, at least the starters. The bullpen's a little rough, but the hitting's interesting, the pitching's interesting in Peoria. Besides that, I think Memphis is the other team that, they're starting to get the Quinn Matthews, the Bryson Motts. Blaze Jordan's been a revelation this year, or not revelation, but he's majorly increased his hard hit rates and his exit velocities this year, which makes him a major league viable guy. And, even some of the supporting cast like a Brian Torres and a Ramon Mendoza are interesting up in Memphis. So.
Yeah, Jordan, for me, I've always felt like when he came over, I kind of felt like he was going to be one of those quad A guys, the guy's going to do well, but maybe never make it. But he does feel like he's done enough that he definitely needs to get a shot at some point in time. Now, again, I know rosters things and trying to figure out how he's going to play in the major leagues. You don't want somebody to come up and just sit. But he definitely has had much better start to this season than I definitely expected.
Yeah, I put out a thread probably a couple weeks ago now that was like, he's seen a major increase in just everything. Like, we always knew the power was there, but in years past, he'd been a ton of swing, make contact, but usually it was weak contact type of guy. And he's kind of turned himself into he's going to swing a lot, but he somehow is just barreling up the ball more and getting more hard hits. And, that's allowed him to tap into the power more and kind of become a more complete hitter. And, honestly, a major league option that's worth looking at, sooner in the future. And, the likely outcome is he probably ends up, being a younger Luken Baker for a few years. But, there's a chance that, he pops and becomes a, usable right-handed bat that hits lefties really well, or, maybe a full-time first or third baseman in the future, depending on how Nolan Gorman or Alec Burleson's futures with the Cardinals look. But, yeah, he's definitely turned himself into a interesting piece, and something that, when they got him in the Motts trade, it was like, he might make it, he might not make it, who really knows, but he's turned himself into something that, the Red Sox might regret giving up, here in a few months or a few years.
And finally, is there a prospect that you have maybe a soft spot for that not everybody else does? Like some kind of under the radar guy that you tend to follow?
He's having a really rough year, and it's unfortunate. But I've always liked Zach Levinson. He's in Double-A. He hits the ball really hard. I was in Springfield last year towards the end of the year when he was playing, and he hit like an 113-mile-an-hour line drive homer, and that was really cool to see. And it's like, yeah, if this guy could ever just figure it out a little bit more. And he's been on like this kind of like on and off year thing. He was really good his first year, struggled his second year, was really good last year again, and now has struggled to start this year. And it's like, this guy could just find a bit more consistency. He looks like a guy who could, slug at the major league level and be a really solid outfield prospect for the Cardinals, but it just kind of hasn't all come to fruition consistently yet. So that's kind of the guy that I find myself watching, especially in a Springfield lineup that, doesn't have much power or much, intrigue besides him and our other favorite guy, John Gazdar, who's kind of interesting. So yeah, those are probably the two guys, John Gazdar and Zach Levinson, that I kind of have a soft spot for in terms of feeling like they could be a major league talent someday.
Yeah, I mean, I anytime we talk about John Gazdar, I think about the last guy that kind of got a prospect shine because of a funny name was Lars Nootbaar, and it kind of worked out okay. So hopefully that's the case with Mr. Gazdar as well. That we'll see him become, maybe get that extra little bit, just because. I mean, whatever tool you can use to get yourself into the major leagues, you do it.
Yeah. And I guess I think this soft spot's starting to become a little bit more, recognized a little bit more wide in the community, and that's Brian Torres. Like he's not ripped the cover off the ball, but he's hit enough and got on base enough over the last year and a half at AAA and even the year before that in Double-A that it's like, I think there's a lot of people that would be happy or would be a little bit intrigued to see, even though he's 28 years old, him make a major league debut just based on kind of how he's performed and his positional versatility.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't, going off the World Baseball Classic may have kept him from making that kind of impact this year, but there's still plenty of time. So, Tyler, it's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed our conversation. Where can people, I know we've talked about it, all this, but, Cardinals prospects, you're writing there pretty much regularly. And then the podcast that comes out fairly regular as well.
Yep. So, I'm a little bit all over the place, but Redbird Farmhands is obviously a Twitter handle. That's where I do a lot of my stuff. I post pretty much every night about something going on in the farm system, with 5 teams going now with the FCL just starting. There's a lot of stuff going on. CardinalsProspects.com is where I write. That site's owned by good friend Kareem. We have a good group over there with Taylor Cruz and Aiden and Max, and we just brought on another person that we're excited to announce here in a couple days, hopefully. So that's fun. And then I work with Deal in the Cards group. So Josh, Shandy, Andrew, and Aiden, we're all over there. So that's where you can find me. And then I can't forget my own podcast, right? Redbirds on the Arch with myself, Aiden, and TZ. So go check that out. That's more of a laid back, casual conversation stuff. We record that one every week or every week and a half usually. So yeah.
Just follow Redbird's Farmhands, because anytime there's, anytime there's something you do, the link is there. So, definitely do that. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to hop on, and this is a fun conversation, and you're kind of the father of all this podcasting stuff and Blogger Day and stuff. So it's been really cool to not only meet you, but I guess the first time I really met you and talked to you was with Scott there a few months back on the FinLead stuff. So I was really just an honor to be on this podcast for sure.
Well, let's not get carried away now. But it is a good thing. And it's always good to have, another option for, because Kyle, we have to have something to balance Kyle out a little bit. Everybody knows.
You didn't hit me with any puns.
I know. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. I should have worked a few up, but we're going early, today, and it kind of threw me out of my rhythm. So I'll work on that. So, all right. Well, next week, Eugene Tucker from Portion Under Bush will be joining us again. Alan should be back as well, so it'll be a three-sided conversation. But look forward to talking about the Cardinals then. But until then, for Tyler, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Well, we didn't catch anything today. Sometimes that happens. But we're looking forward to the season. We're ready to go. We're geared up. Coming out here doing something relaxing to get away for a little bit. But, no fish today. What you got on that?
I got no fish, but it's definitely baseball season, so let's go Cards.
All right.